Good afternoon. My name is Fraser Wells. I'm chair of the board of the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Meet the Candidates Forum. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which the city of St. John, or Mennequist, is situated on is the traditional territory of the Louistoquay, along with their indigenous neighbors, the Mi'kmaq and the Passamaquoddy, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s that protected their rights to lands and resources. I'd like to thank each of the candidates for taking the time out of their busy schedules to take part in this discussion. Engaging with their platforms allows voters to make informed decisions that will help shape the future of our region. Our region has a rich industrial history, a strong entrepreneurial spirit, and a community that cares deeply about its future, as we can see here. But we're also a city facing some serious economic pressures. As St. John was identified by the Canadian Chamber as one of the most vulnerable Canadian city to tariffs. And that's a warning signal. It speaks to the delicate balance of our local economy, the importance of trade, and the need for thoughtful, proactive leadership at every level of government. That's one of the core reasons why the upcoming federal election matters. The decisions made in Ottawa will ripple across our port, our plants, our small businesses, and our families. This afternoon, we have a valuable opportunity to hear directly from individuals who are vying to represent our region in Parliament. This is your chance to listen, ask questions, and think critically about the kind of future that we want for our region and who is best positioned to help get us there. So thank you for being here and being engaged. I will now turn it over to Colm Connolly, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Bloom Funding, and who is someone we're incredibly grateful to be chairing our Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. Colm will moderate and explain the format of our event. All yours, Colm.
Thank you, Fraser. As mentioned, my name is Colm Connolly, and I am the chair of the Government Relations Committee at the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. I want to take this opportunity as well to thank each of the candidates for taking the time out of their busy schedules to speak with the business community. The format for today's event will be to allow each of the candidates to speak about their vision, platform, and plans regarding business and economic development for the future of our region. Each candidate will have up to 5 minutes, and we request that all candidates be respectful. I want to emphasize that this is not a debate, but we want to hear from each of the party in relation to their vision and how they want to see the region move forward. Once we hear from each of the candidates, it will then be followed by a Q&A. There will be a time limit of 90 seconds for each response, and a signal will sound. The signal will be something to this effect when the time is up. I wanted to intro each of the candidates first, sorry. To my left, starting there, we have Melissa Young. I did condense the bios that I received from each of you, really appreciate them, but we had to condense them for time a little bit. A lifelong New Brunswicker, Melissa Young brings over 30 years of leadership in workforce development and skilled trades. She has served as the CEO of Skilled Trades Ontario and has deep experience in both union and government roles, and she's passionate about affordability, housing, and safe communities. Welcome, Melissa. Wayne Long. Wayne has served as MP since 2015, championing progressive grassroots politics and delivering over $1 billion in local investments. A former executive in aquaculture and hockey, he helped bring the Sea Dogs to St. John, leading them to a historic Memorial Cup win and earning recognition as the league's top executive. Welcome, Wayne. David McFarquhar. David is a physicist and engineer with a strong foundation in progressive politics. His platform focuses on climate action, social equity, and sustainable development. He offers a bold, grassroots-oriented alternative to traditional party lines. Welcome, David. John Williamson, seasoned parliamentarian and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. John is a current MP for New Brunswick Southwest. He champions fiscal responsibility, affordable energy, and strong federal oversight. Welcome, John. And finally, Karen Ludwig. Karen made history in 2015 as the first woman elected to represent NB Southwest. She has a deep experience in international trade, public health, and education, and brings a strong record of economic advocacy and parliamentary leadership. Welcome, candidates. Thank you. So I'll now draw to determine who goes first on their 5 minutes. Yep. John Williamson.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out today. This is another opportunity for us to explain our ideas and our vision and our backgrounds to voters in the greater St. John area. For those of you who don't know, I'm a three-term member of Parliament. My wife Kelly is a captain in the Royal Canadian Navy. We have a young daughter. In addition to my work in Parliament, I'm chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, which I've done for the last 3 years. And about this riding, it's changed. I've participated in chamber events before with all candidates in the greater St. John area, but as you know, the St. John riding is split in two. And this wasn't something that I decided, and it isn't something that Wayne decided as well. It was done by the commissioners, but the effect is, and I think it's positive, despite some concern from St. John, that going forward, the city will have not one but two members of Parliament in Ottawa fighting for its interest to ensure its voice is heard loud and clear. And I think this happened in the past, but St. John issues for me are always kind of important but tangential. But now they're becoming front and center, I think, for all of us here. In the current riding, or the riding that was just dissolved, there were 17 municipalities. That declines to 15, but of course, St. John is a large area. And the population goes from 68,000 to 80,000, and the square kilometers from 10,000 to 8,000. So this is a big area. And I've had the opportunity to, over the course of this campaign, really dive into St. John West and get to know some of the people, the merchants, and the families that live there. Going forward, I think this is an election that's all about change. And when you cast your vote on Monday, if you haven't already, it'll be to elect local representatives for this area. And as was pointed out, St. John is the #1 city. I suppose it's the ranking that we don't want to have, that it will be most impacted by the Trump tariffs. And New Brunswick, though, is I think the province that is most impacted as well. So big challenges for our province, our ridings, and for our cities. And so we need, I think, a government in Ottawa that is determined to fight Trump, pay any price, really be in a strong position to deal with the U.S. administration. And we do that in part with strong negotiations, having firm lines, but also ensuring our local economy is strong. And the issues I'm hearing about at the door, affordability is top of mind. It doesn't matter if you're a senior, a family, a worker, a business. Affordability has been a real struggle for Canadians. And this is something that we have a plan to tackle, whether it's lower taxes, taking the capital gains tax off investments that happen right here in Canada, taking the HST off of cars that are made in Canada. Home ownership is critical. Young people today are left out in the cold because of the ruinous policies that have come out of Ottawa, and this is something that we're going to prioritize to build millions of new homes going forward. Crime and chaos. It's in all our communities. It used to be a big city problem. It's bad in St. John, bad in St. John West, bad in cities or municipalities right across this southwest New Brunswick. We have planned to reverse the policy that have come out of Ottawa that allow for revolving bail, criminals with long rap sheets who are arrested and rearrested time again because the federal government hasn't prioritized safer streets. And of course, jobs and resources, which I think is an important issue in any election, but particularly this one. I've long advocated for an energy pipeline to St. John. It was scuttled by the current government. And if we had that pipeline today, not only would there be 1 million barrels of oil coming to St. John, we could export any surplus to Europe to offset Russian crude. And of course, locally as well, the old riding I represented was beautiful. The new riding I represented is beautiful and has the added benefit of having a brewery. But again, the Liberal government has worked against the brewery. In 2017, the two individuals that are here representing the government voted for the beer escalator tax. Andrew Olson said this is the #1 irritant that Moosehead faces. It's not the Trump tariffs, it's not even interprovincial tariffs, it's the automatic tax increase at Moosehead. The last Canadian-owned brewery in the country faces every year without a vote in Parliament that is hurting jobs and investment. We're going to eliminate that tax. We're not going to target St. John businesses for special taxation that puts them out of business. So those are just some of the ideas we have, some of the ideas I have. I look forward to your questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We're going to take the next name.
Wayne Long.
Wayne Long.
It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. I'm privileged. I've been privileged to be your member of parliament for almost 10 years now. I think this election should be divided into two components. I think what's happening nationally and the threat that we face as a country, a threat to our economy, a threat to our sovereignty, and a threat to our very well-being from Donald Trump. And the risk that we face. I mean, we had an ally to the south of us who's not an ally anymore. He's an adversary. And who would ever think we would see the day where the United States of America would view Russia more favorably than Canada? So on a national level, I think this is this is probably the most important election that we will ever have. And we will have to make one of the most important choices as Canadians that we will have to make. And I think the massive turnout that we saw this past weekend in the advance polls confirms that Canadians are voting like they never have before for somebody who they feel can protect our country, stand up against Donald Trump, protect our economy. And that person is Mark Carney. Mark Carney has world respect. He's arguably one of the top 5 economic minds in the world. The premiers respect him. You can see after the First Minister's meetings, they're unified. They're talking about working together, whether it's dropping inter-provincial trade barriers, whether it's building an energy corridor from coast to coast to coast. We as Canadians need to revisit and re-examine and rethink everything that we have done in the past. Everything. Everything is on the table now. So first and foremost, as Canadians, we need to understand what is at stake nationally, number one. Locally, we're a country of 2 stories, or we're a city of 2 stories. We have immense wealth. We have 5 or 6 world head offices. Those head offices and those companies and those thousands of employees are at risk with respect to tariffs and the impact they're going to have. We all know that St. John is one of the most, if not the most impacted city. But we also have immense poverty. We have homelessness. We have a lack of affordable housing. And I think that as Liberals, we believe that government can do good things. We believe that government has a role to play and can play a role in people's lives. So everyone in this room, businesses, chamber, what have you, has to understand what we need to do to move forward as a community and as a country. I've got the experience, I've got the track record, I've delivered well over $1 billion for this riding. East St. John, airport improvements, this field house we're in, MBCC Trade School, buses, the MBCC campus redo, that is all because of federal investment. Port St. John, our waterfront development, Fort Latour, all because of federal investment. UMBSJ, Integrative Health Initiative, transformational for our city, for our region, all because of federal investment. I've shown I can deliver. I've shown I can navigate Ottawa. I know how to knock on the right doors, talk to the right people, be in the right rooms. My business background, I think, is an asset for me. I have a whiteboard in my office. I always joke, I have a whiteboard in my office and a whiteboard in my constituency office. I have the projects listed. I know how to go after those projects. I know how to bring that funding back to this riding. For too long, this riding suffered for a lack of federal funding. We've changed that over the last 10 years. And as we move through this debate, I'll talk about my priorities for St. John-Kennebecasis moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Melissa Young.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see everybody here tonight. It's a great crowd. Business community is so important to this riding, and no one knows that better than myself as a small business owner here in this community. I own a couple of businesses. My husband's also owns a construction company here in the St. John area as well. So I'm proud to say that I am a lifelong resident of New Brunswick. I'm just a plain country girl that grew up in a little place called Ripples, which is near Minto. And if you don't know where Minto is, it's near Fredericton. If you don't know where that is, well, it's an hour up the highway. So, I grew up, my father was a fisherman, a farmer, and he worked in the woods. He did what he had to do to provide for us, and my mother was a secretary at the university. So pretty humble beginnings at that. I have worked my entire career in workforce development in one way, shape, form, or another. I've worked tirelessly for workers and small and medium enterprises alike to bring business forward. I have a lot of experience in interprovincial regulatory changes. I did that across Canada for the skilled trades. I led the harmonization here in Atlantic Canada for labor mobility, and then that went on to go to the national level as well. So I've done a lot of work in that area. I've spent a lot of time in Ottawa. Out of my 33 years in my career, working career, 12 of those were spent working for a few different governments, one being the Council of Atlantic Premiers. So I worked for the 4 Atlantic Premiers at the same time. 3 different stripes they were, but however, when we sat at the table to come to consensus and actually move an agenda forward, which was around labor mobility and removing those barriers for people to be able to be transient through the Atlantic provinces, there were no stripes. The hats were hung at the door. It was best for all parties, and we were able to move that agenda forward quite nicely and then able to do that nationally as well. A little bit about the riding. I'm running because I can't, after 10 years, I just can't stand by any longer. I came back from a stint working for Skilled Trades Ontario, as was mentioned in my bio. I commuted back and forth every week from here to Toronto and back again, and then drove all over Ontario when I was up there as well. During the week, Doug Ford asked me to come up and fix their apprenticeship system, so I gave them 3 years of my life almost doing that, and it really was of my life because I only got to see my family on the weekends. Much like many of our trades workers, we were on the same flights. The most disappointing thing that I know COVID has some to do with this, but the state of our airport and the fact that I could very rarely fly in and out of St. John. I would have to travel elsewhere, either to Moncton or Fredericton, to be able to commute back and forth just to be able to get home at a decent hour and not have to get up at 3 a.m. to leave. I could be home more than 18 hours. So that is a priority for me, our St. John Airport. To do that, it's going to take a lot of parties and a lot of work. However, that being said, we're going to need to do that if we want to bring economic investment to St. John. I in no way can speak at all against the accomplishments of my opponent to my left on the money that has been brought to the riding. But what I haven't seen is any new investment in having new business come here. We need a pipeline. We need another Point LaPro. We need to have that national energy corridor built. We don't have it. We don't have our own energy. We're buying it from Quebec. As a federal government, we don't have the complete oversight in that, but we have a huge influence on how the province spends the money that we give them through our labor market transfer agreements, which are massive. That includes healthcare and education as well. So we need to bring more accountability to our provincial governments and to our municipal governments as well as to how they're going to spend the money that we give them to spend in this province. So it's high time, I think, that we have, if you'll take the construction term, because I do have a construction background. It's time for a political renovation in this country, and I think that our party is well versed to do that. My leader has spent the last year visiting over 6,000 factories, construction sites, workers in every sector, healthcare, hospitality, across the board, union training centers, public colleges, private colleges, you name it, and he's visited them. And I think our plan, which was released today, is a very solid plan. It does bring accountability back to the table for the government, and I'm looking forward to being able to deliver on some of that plan here in New Brunswick in general, but more importantly, right here in this riding of St. John-Kennebecasis in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Karen Ludwig.
It really is my pleasure to be here in St. John. I'm not new to this game, as many people know. I was in office from 2015 to 2019, but what most people don't know in this room is that my career actually started in St. John. My first gig at teaching was at UNBSJ, and I was there from 90 to 93, as well as I had a co-position with the Human Development Council. So I do have a long history working to and from St. John. One of the things that brought me back to running in this election, because it wasn't my plan. I was having a really nice life the last 6 years. It was the issue. And when David Lametti, the former Minister of Justice, called me, he said, "We need you to come back, Ludwig." I said, "Well, you must have someone." He goes, "No, we need you to come back with your 20 years of international trade experience." And in 2015, international trade was not a calling at the time. And when Dominic LeBlanc asked me what position I wanted when I was in Parliament, I said international trade, because that's my skill set. So for the 4 years I was in Ottawa, I served on the Standing Committee for International Trade. I was voted twice by my colleagues in the House from both sides of the aisle as the Canada-US Vice Chair, and that led to a lot of discussions and roles in terms of international trade. Also in the involvement with the first NAFTA and the rewriting of that one, the European Trade Agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and steel and aluminum tariffs. I had many discussions with John Irving over steel and aluminum. The other reason I looked at coming back was I was looking at the leadership, and clearly we needed a reset. Mark Carney, with his experience, I believe and still believe is the only one out of all the contenders to get us through this mess and help us navigate to a better spot with a stronger economy. He has the experience, he has a steady hand. He is the navigator for us. When we look at international trade, it's easy politically for people to say, we need to make that pivot, we need to diversify. I taught international trade management at UNBSJ. I worked with local businesses, large and small. One of my former students is actually my campaign chair. And it's also about looking at the markets, diversifying, targeting within a market, finding out if there's someone that you co-market with, do the business with, change the branding, what are the regulations, international trade financing, how do you mitigate risk? So that pivot is significant. It's a serious pivot. Larger companies can make a pivot somewhat easier than small businesses, but they all need the support of a government. Within our plan, there's a $5 billion trade diversification, a corridor fund. St. John is a wonderful example of the fund recipient for that. When we look at West St. John, which is now part of our federal riding, I'm pleased to work with my colleague, my friend of 35 years, Wayne Long. If we look at the Port of St. John, as John said, we didn't redraw the lines. Who would ever divide a city in the middle of a port? But I will say, with Wayne and I at the helm on this one, it would be one port, one city, 2 MPs advocating for St. John. When we look at infrastructure projects, I hear people all around West St. John and other parts of our federal riding, they are scared. Their number one issue is the trade tariffs. And it's not just the Trump's tariffs. Tariffs are not the way to go about creating more opportunities for building business development. It's also about the tariffs with the Chinese. So 60% of our lobsters are exported to China. Now there's a 25% tariff on them. So we are in a truly trade war. When we look at our trade within this area and business development in this area, I've heard from many, many people in West St. John about Sims Corner. That is a transportation bottleneck. There's an opportunity there for the federal government to work with the municipal governments and the provincial governments to find a solution for a better ease of transportation and a redesign. When we talk about housing, housing is an issue all across this riding. The Housing Accelerator Fund, I've heard from different mayors in each of the municipalities who I've met with, that's a significant fund to draw from. We need the federal government's role within that. In St. John West, we could look no further than Dunn Avenue or Fundy Heights developments. Those were done after World War II for returning veterans. They needed a place to live, they needed a place to call home. Those communities are still there today, and the properties have been bought and sold. Already? I'll be getting back to you soon. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And I apologize ahead of time. Unlike my colleagues to either side of me, I am here with only 5 minutes to speak for my party and really representing the entire left side of the political spectrum. And considering that we were unceremoniously excluded from the federal debates, I actually have to run through our policies and provide you some actual details about the ways in which they would affect small and medium businesses in St. John and John-Kennebecasis instead of just being able to spend the time introducing myself. So apologize in advance for this. But it has been nice to hear people on both sides saying that we need change, but also we need to completely change the way that we do things. And that is going to be, I think, apparent from the content of what I have to say here. So, yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak here today. The Green Party has a bit of a mixed bag of reputation when it comes to business. And I'm going to clear it right out of the way, that I consider myself a degrowth socialist. So I'm not going to stand here and take this opportunity to deliver a sermon on how the blind, unrestrained pursuit of profit has led us to the brink of social and ecological collapse, because I know who I'm talking to, and I don't want to be asked to give the microphone back. I also know that small and medium-sized businesses have a role to play in the transformation away from fossil fuel capitalism towards a circular, sustainable economy, and St. John needs to play a big part in that. So what I'm going to do is just go over a few points from the Green Platform and my own particular priorities, where our priorities do align with those of the people here. So let's start with energy. It's hard to imagine a paradigm that favors large businesses more than the fossil fuel industry. Regardless of who has represented us in Parliament, St. John has been held hostage for decades by corporate interests who enjoy massive tax advantages and move their wealth out of the country as soon as they're able to. Of course, they provide us with energy, but 80% of the refinery's output right now is shipped to the United States, which, as my colleagues have so easily pointed out, is no longer a reliable export market or trade partner. Why are we not, instead of investing in another pipeline, investing in renewable energy generated in New Brunswick, for New Brunswick, that we can use to provide cleaner, cheaper energy that can really only be a good thing for businesses and entrepreneurs in St. John? Greens are also committed to investing heavily in retrofits to increase energy efficiency, making St. John a more affordable place to do business. These, combined with our plan to develop an east-west energy grid to share this renewable energy more efficiently, offer far more benefits for entrepreneurs than sinking billions of dollars into a new piece of infrastructure to supply a refinery that even the Irvings haven't seen as having a long-term future over the past decade. I think if you talk to anybody who works on the infrastructure there, they can tell you that. They also reduce the potential economic risk that we have internationally as we seek stronger economic relationships with countries who take climate change seriously and who may penalize us in the future for removing our carbon pricing and having the worst track record of any G7 country for reducing emissions relative to 1990 levels. Of course, the economy of tomorrow does also depend heavily on innovation. That means having smart people who can afford to take risks and develop new businesses. And that means making access to higher education as widespread as possible. As Fraser mentioned, I have a master's degree in physics. I can tell you from firsthand experience how important post-secondary education is for developing technologies of the future and how many people are unable to pursue it due to financial barriers. We can't just forgive loans for people who can afford to take them out in the first place. We need free post-secondary education. We need to reduce taxes on the lowest earners, as the Greens propose to raise the tax-exempt income floor up to $40,000. to enable people to take risks without losing the roof over their heads. We need to be investing in non-market housing in various ways that allow people to be innovative and make the things that St. John needs for the future. Then there's the question, I guess, of what sort of innovation we want to encourage. For decades, we've had a strong focus across the entire world, the global economy, of stripping the earth of its resources in more efficient ways and finding new ways to create wealth from raw materials. The economy of the future will no longer be like this. I think we see this changing now. It will focus increasingly on reusing our waste, on creating wealth from things that right now are considered to have no value. And entrepreneurs in St. John, like Plastics, are doing this already, taking ghost fishing gear and turning it into durable building materials. And the profits from these small, innovative ventures stay in our communities instead of being stashed in overseas tax havens by multinationals. Everyone benefits in a circular economy, especially the planet. There is one sort of innovation I would like to particularly mention that we should be skeptical of. I'm not going to give it too much time. But given the current geopolitical climate, I can't not talk about small modular reactors, which are a big part of the other parties' platforms. Canada has no facilities to create the enriched uranium that they need to run. We do have uranium mining. We can supply CANDU reactors. But should we really be investing in technology that is experimental at this point, has not been demonstrated at scale, and makes us more dependent on the US or perhaps the world's other largest producer of enriched uranium, Russia? This new concern brings me to my final point. Small and medium-sized businesses are some of the most threatened, as we've heard already many times, by economic disturbance to the south. The major parties all promise some sort of attempt to renormalize trade with America. I'd like to say instead, well, why bother? America may be good for business, but it has waged war relentlessly across the world for the last 30 years and is currently the sole financier or the primary financier of a genocide in Palestine, one that our own government is also complicit in. As we seek new trade relationships to benefit our small and medium-sized businesses, we should seek to be a moral leader as well as an environmental and economic one. We have an opportunity to create a Canada and a St. John that our children will be proud of in the future. Considering ideas outside the business mainstream gives an opportunity for this, and I think everyone will do well to consider what I have to say here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We're now going to the Q&A section, and again, so it's 90 seconds for a response, and we're just going to go up and down the table. I think is the easiest, just because that mic has to be moved all the time. And so, can we start here with Melissa? So, what one positive thing can you say about each of your fellow candidates' platforms? Is the question.
Well, that's a loaded question. There's no doubt about that. From the Liberal platform, I guess I know that where they're going with their housing, but I think it's a really bad idea for government to stick their nose in and get involved in building homes. Leave that to the experts and stay out of it. Is my answer to that. Although I don't think it's a bad idea in where you're going with it. I just don't think that I would go at it about being the actual contractor, if you will, at the table. Because this, unfortunately, is not like it was post-World War II. And building those homes and housing people in them is not going to be like it was at that point in time in history. We're in 2025. This is a different world, and it just will not feasibly work. On the Green platform, I'm trying to say something positive here, so it's very difficult, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, this country needs a change, and there's no doubt about it, and I'm very passionate about that, so I'm not going to candy coat anything that I'm going to say. I understand where you're coming from, David, with some of your platform. However, at the end of the day, we can, have daisies and kiss flowers and all that great stuff at the end of the day, but that's not going to make the world turn and the economy move. And that's what we need in this province, and that's what we need right here in St. John-Kennebecasis is investment.
Okay, so,
One positive.
but everybody's? Or what?
Just whatever your perception of one positive.
Well, first off with David, I think he's got the second best election sign out there. I don't know if you saw it, but it's a classic. It says, "Don't go long, go Mick far." So I told him I wanted one for my garage. No, a couple things. Respect, again, to David, respect. I mean, you know, we need young adults, we need youth in politics, number one. So thank you for putting your name forward. Number two, just the way the House of Commons sits, my seatmates to the right are Elizabeth May and Mike Morris from the Green Party. I'm just kind of on the edge of row 3, and they're right there. So, you know, I get to know Elizabeth and Mike a lot. Do I agree with any of their platform? Not a lot. But guess what? They believe that climate change is real. Okay? They believe climate change is impacting our planet. And they believe that we need to act, as do we as Liberals. We're in a coastal community. We see the impact firsthand that climate change is having on us with respect to the Bay of Fundy, to the ocean, to the St. John River, so on and so forth. We see the severity of storms, heat. So kudos to David for putting your name forward, and I do agree with you on climate change.
I got 90 seconds, and I think I can be diplomatic with this because, you know, as a small party, we've kind of got to look at everybody and figure out where can we find some common ground on different issues. On the Liberal side, I think their commitments to expanding healthcare that Carney has at this point committed to keeping, and to expanding affordable daycare, $10 a day daycare. These are both huge things that allow people to take risks. They reduce the exposure of people's risk to having a job and being, you know, subservient to somebody else. They let them explore new things. From the Conservative side, I think Melissa mentioned earlier something about mobility of workers. This is also a big deal. So many of our, well, not so many, but several of our problems right now can be traced directly back to that. I think if we make it easier for healthcare workers to move around, and if we increase mobility across provinces, the same way we want to interconnect our energy grids, we help all of Canada by letting people choose to practice their trades, practice their profession, and take up jobs where they would like to live. And that in turn is going to make them better at doing the sorts of innovative things that Canada needs to be a leader in over the next 4, 10, 40 years. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm done.
So this is I guess what we call a cheeky question. We've been saying a Mark Carney government will be a 4th Liberal government, and I think their platform is very honest about that. If you think spending was high under Justin Trudeau, it's going to be even higher under Mark Carney. The platform does not repeal Bill C-69, even though Wayne just talked about building pipelines. No pipeline is going to be built as long as investors are steering clear of C-69, which is the no new pipeline bill that was passed in a previous parliament that in the last 10 years. And I think most importantly is their commitment to the so-called industrial carbon tax credit. Now, we've all enjoyed the break on the carbon tax. Prices have come down, but I know, at least I don't know Wayne's vision, but I know Karen's vision is that the industrial carbon tax is coming, which is going to be the carbon tax. And if you think the carbon tax is not going to impact consumers, I'll get 2 examples for you. One, Susan Holt said she would take it off in her first, I think it was 100 days, and it's proving to be very difficult because it's going to squeeze taxpayers, us, and so it's still there. And I think to make the point, to really press the point, when Mr. Irving at Irving Refinery is hit with an industrial carbon tax, who do you think is going to pay it? Him or everyone in this room? I think we all know the answer. The carbon tax is coming back under the Carney Liberals, and it's going to be just as punitive, just as punishing as the one they've temporarily paused under the bill, under the law that's still there. Thank you.
I will be positive about this. First off, pharmacare, dental care, $10 a day daycare. I firmly agree with that, and I appreciate that the Green Party and the NDP party has that in their platform. When we look at the issue of climate change, one of the areas that I worked on very closely, very personally when I was in Ottawa was Lyme disease. And I can say that there's so much work that can be done when you have elected officials that can work across party aisles. And I had reached out very early on and I asked Elizabeth May if she would co-chair an all-party roundtable on Lyme disease to promote the awareness, prevention, and work on treatment plans. We did that, and I think that's the kind of government that we want. Bill C-69 that my colleague to my right has mentioned, That was introduced, yes, when I was in office. Bill C-69 is not the anti-pipeline bill. Bill C-69 is about building public trust and public consultation. If it was so easy to drop a pipeline, there was no pipeline dropped in the Harper years when John was in office. That's about public trust. If we listen to Save Laurenville, what are they looking for? They're looking for public trust and consultation. So there's a comparable there. If we were opposed against pipelines, we wouldn't have bought a pipeline in 2018 to take oil from Alberta to saltwater or seawater in British Columbia. We are in support of it, but you do need public consultation along the way for approvals. Thank you.
I think we should be able to do it from the front with this mic so nobody has to continue to do the hula. Businesses are affected by a reduction of immigration by half. What will your party do to help businesses who don't want to lose valuable employees? We'll start at this side and go the opposite direction.
Thank you. When we look at immigration across the country, but particularly in southern New Brunswick, we need to have targeted immigration. When I've met with municipal leaders across the riding, even during this campaign time, the mayor here for St. John, she would like to grow the population by 2%. She sees immigration as an important part of that. But immigration needs to be targeted based on skill sets. When we look at the next 8 years, approximately 22% of our skilled residential construction workers will be retiring. Part of that can be filled through immigration, but they have to be, the numbers need to be controlled. But to do that comprehensively, we need to have our housing supply increased. We need to have our infrastructure to support it. And we do need the numbers. We will not grow as a province without immigration, but there has to be a solid plan around it. And I believe the Liberals have a solid plan to have a constructive, measured immigration plan that works together with the provincial governments and the talks to municipalities and businesses. Business needs are very specific, and they're often very specific on skill sets, and that's our targeted area. Thank you.
Would you just read the question again, please?
Businesses are affected by the reduction of immigration by half. What will your party do to help businesses who don't want to lose valuable employees?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I don't want to sound negative again, but records matter. We have a housing crisis in this country, an affordability crisis, for a number of reasons. The inflationary cycle the government has put us in, and the vast number of people that are looking for homes. And the numbers are so bleak and so broken that even the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said the Liberals got it wrong. The system is broken. But it's not just broken for Canadians and young families who are trying to get homes and start a life. There was a deal that was also extended to immigrants that came to this country who were promised a better life if they applied to our universities, took out a student visa, told if they came, worked hard, studied hard, they would be able to join the Canadian family. And in fact, that dream turned into a nightmare as students came here, lured by universities and colleges across this country who took advantage of tuition fees that are 2 or 3 times what Canadians pay, but the schools and colleges didn't ensure there was housing. And so now a lot of these young people their visas are being revoked. It's a real challenge. But you know, in my life, if a contractor does a terrible job and wrecks the house and foundation, you don't hire that same contractor to bail you out of it. You look at a party that's got a good track record in immigration, and when we left office, our immigration system in this country was working, point system, merit-based, and it didn't have the acrimony that we have now under 10 years Liberal rule. Thank you.
I think just the way the question was worded, just to start, seemed a bit funny to me. That it said we're going to lower immigration levels. What do we do for businesses who don't want to lose employees? I don't think we're proposing here conducting massive deportation raids. We're just saying that we're not going to keep the same flows of people coming in. And even if that were the problem that we think it is, I think if you look at the numbers, we have there's a systematic overestimation of Canada's population that leads to a disproportionate blame being laid on immigration for housing prices and things, and that pushes people to oppose immigration because it's been turned into this scapegoat for why are my jobs paying poorly? Why is housing expensive? reducing immigration is not necessarily the beast we need to be fighting here. We need to be looking at, okay, if people can't find employees within Canada, are there not enough trained employees? We need to be training more people with investments in education. Are we not paying them enough to get people to work these jobs? You know, we have to look at the other reasons that employers might be having a hard time finding employees, while also addressing the systematic issues that create opposition to immigration. And then, you know, in 4 years, we're having a different conversation. And we cannot be blaming people coming from the global south looking for a better life that we have promised them, as John said. You know, we can stop scapegoating them for the reason that the business interests, in many cases, are creating life harder for voters. Thank you.
You know, we'll never apologize for being a pro-immigration, newcomer welcoming party, number one. 2016 Syrian refugees was something that was morally important for us to do as a country, as a community. So, you know, we're never going to apologize for bringing newcomers and being pro-immigration, number one. Number two, we as MPs need to talk to the businesses in our community, whether it's Subway, it's Pete McMaster, or Tony Ratchford at Subway, or Dustin Springer, or Darcy Murphy at Tim Hortons, and find out exactly what they need, what we can match with respect to newcomers or immigrants coming into the skill sets they need. So number one, we need to work with the businesses in the community, which I have done. I've talked to, I understand the needs, I understand the challenges. There's a blend there between making sure wages are high enough and getting the right people into the jobs. Ask yourself, ask those owners of those businesses if they could even survive without bringing newcomers in to work in those businesses, and none of them can, number one. We had a perfect storm in New Brunswick. I mean, we grew more in 3 years than the province did in 30. Think about that, okay? We surpassed 800,000 people. So, yeah, we were upside down. Yeah, we had to shut off the tap a bit. But we're pro-immigration. We're always going to be welcoming to newcomers because that is the future of our community. Thank you.
Well, I'll be quite frank and honest. I don't disagree with my colleague to my left here, with Wayne. He's bang on, but I will add to that. I do agree immigration is a necessity. This country is built on immigration. I actually have a refugee from Ukraine that is working in my campaign office. She's been here about a year. She's a doctor, and she's working voluntarily in my campaign office. We have, you know, we need doctors, we need healthcare workers. So the system has, you know, some glitches. I'd say they're rather large. We need to fix. When I look at immigration, I think about how interest rates are tied to inflation. I think immigration should be tied to unemployment rates. And as Wayne said, I will agree, they need to be tied to what the requirements of the employers are at the time in the industry. We have to do consultation, and we have to talk to those folks and find out what's needed. I just finished a project up a few months ago where we were bringing in automotive service technician workers, and I know there's a gentleman here that owns a shop because I talked about this to him when I came back from Ontario, and we were able to go to the Philippines and do an analysis of credentials in the training and on-the-job experience that automotive service technicians were doing in the Philippines, match it to our Canadian standards, identify the very small gap that there was, and now we're able to bring in those workers to Canada to come to work as it's an identified need. So we need to do more of that. We do have to also attach it to what's available for housing as well, and our unemployment rates, as I did mention. So, thank you.
So we see housing coming up a lot, even at our Government Relations Committee, and there's a question here around housing, so I'm going to ask that. What will your party do to support the development of housing, enabling infrastructure and programs at different municipalities as well? And we'll start here with Melissa and go down the line again.
So the question on housing. So our party has said this early on into the election, and of course we released our platform today, and it was in there, removing the GST on homes that are up to $1.3 million. So that is part of what we're going to be doing with housing investment. But there is much more to it than that for us. It's identifying with municipalities and getting rid of that red tape. Having a construction company, I do know what it's like to deal with municipalities to get anything done and built. It's very, very difficult, and it takes a long, long time. And it takes so long sometimes, the projects just don't happen because of it. So we need to work more closely with our municipality partners, more so than even our provincial partners, because that's really where the rubber hits the road when it comes to housing, is in the municipalities. And we're not working very closely with them at all on a federal level. There are funds out there that are available, the money flows in, and there it sits, because there's no plan attached to it. Then they go looking for a plan, because that's exactly what's happened with the Housing Accelerator Fund that is coming here to St. John. I know the money's been announced, but now there's a call out, come to us with your plan so we can see how we're gonna spend it. To me, that's backwards. It should be the other way around, because there's gonna be, again, very low accountability on that. Thank you.
Look, as a federal government, we recognize that we need to step up. There's a housing shortage, housing crisis right across this country, in particular affordable housing. So I know our provincial housing minister, David Hickey, is here in the audience today, and David hears me say it a lot, housing is provincial jurisdiction, but we recognize as a federal government that there's a role for us to play. And before 2015, the federal government removed CMHC really from the housing business. So we got CMHC back in the business of houses, supporting people for building houses in 2015. We've delivered millions to this riding in housing, whether it's through the Co-Investment Fund, the Rapid Housing Initiative, other CMHC initiatives, and the Housing Accelerator Fund to, in this community, the town of Grand Bay, Westfield, and obviously the city of St. John, millions of dollars. St. John has broken a record for housing development. This year, we got them another $1 million to top them up to $10 million. The Housing Accelerator Fund is wanted by municipalities, towns, and communities right across this country. The leader of the Conservative Party said he'd cancel the program, number one, and number two, told his MPs not to advocate and not to go after the funding. You want to ask yourself why other communities around St. John haven't got the funding? Also, with respect to Quispam-Cis, I know they have a great application in, and I'm going to deliver that funding for Quispam-Cis if I'm reelected. Thank you.
Okay, so if some of you have been driving around the last few days, as we've just gotten my signs up, you may have noticed one of mine in particular, which says, get the stock market out of the housing market. Housing prices didn't really get crazy until COVID, right? There was a spike, and that didn't happen because we doubled the population of Canada. It didn't happen because we burned down 20% of our housing stock, right? When housing is priced at market rates, it's vulnerable to whatever the market will pay. And when people need to have a roof over their heads, they're inclined to pay more to not sleep on the streets. So housing as a need can ratchet up its price without really any oversight. The Green Party is committed to increasing our stock of socialized, truly affordable housing. It's going to be capped at no more than 30% of a person's income for either rent or a mortgage. And that's going to bring us, if we double, triple, going up by 7 times, we would start to approach the social housing levels of the nice social democratic European countries a lot of people like to compare ourselves to. And it's not saying that we're taking, we're blaming the businesses who are building the houses, right? They might build a place for $250,000, but it's been financed by a developer from Toronto. I'm getting these numbers from a guy I know who builds houses out in Quispam-Cis. It'll cost them $250K to build it. They'll sell it for $500,000 because the developer says, well, that's how much return I can make on my investment, right? The people doing the work are not the problem here. The problem is the investors who have made this a vehicle. The problem is the government who decided 30 years ago that this would be a primary store of wealth for Canadians and that gutted our socialized housing market. And I like the idea that the Liberals are pro-social housing, but they've had their fair share of government over the last 30 years. Liberals and Conservatives have done the same thing and the problem hasn't changed. So we need to fix the thing at the core of this. Thank you.
Again, the housing market is a mess. Prices have doubled in the last 10 years. And I've met people, I'm sure everyone on the stage has met people, young people in their 20s and early 30s and older who are struggling with that first home ownership, the dream of home ownership. But it's out of reach. I meet people who can't afford a down payment. They think rents are so high. They're living at home to pay down some bills and hopefully pay up and to afford a mortgage one day. We have to fix this. And Melissa outlined some of our proposals. Now, Wayne and Karen are wrong. I've worked hard on the Accelerator Fund. I secured money for Grand Bay Westfield, worked hard with that municipality, secured money for Harvey. But the demand was great, and not every municipality was successful. And in this business, when I'm not successful, I go back and I keep working. And like Wayne, I don't always listen to the party leader. I do what I need to do to get things done for my riding. And I delivered on these programs, and I'll keep delivering and fighting, whether it's Small Craft Harbor. Because Wayne, you lost a Small Craft Harbor here over in Lorneville. Your Liberal government withdrew the funding, and the wharf is not going to get repaired. Now, I don't blame you for it. Decisions like that happen, but your record is not perfect, far from it. I've got a good record. I fight for my riding. There's been 17 municipalities, there'll soon be 15, and I'm going to fight for every single one of them to make sure they get the federal dollars that they're deserved, because they're following the programs and they're putting forward good ideas, particularly on housing. Thank you.
Thank you, and great question. First off, housing needs to be safe. It needs to be affordable, certainly accessible. The federal government does have a role to play in this. And I would like to give a shout out to Mayor Merrifield, that's in the back here. I met with Brittany and some of her council members this afternoon or this morning. I met with a number of mayors across our riding of St. John-St.Croix, and I can tell you that housing is an issue. They have applied. And it isn't right, it is not leadership when the leader of a party instructs his MPs not to advocate for the Housing Accelerator funding because he's planning to cut it. I asked Brittany and her council members what it would be like if they didn't have the funding. It would be devastating. They need the funding, they need the support. And to say that the municipalities are not consulted, municipalities are key to getting this housing off the ground. In the example of Grand Bay Westfield, if they had their druthers, it would be 300 units, not 123 units, and they are making their building areas development ready to attract investors. That takes a coordinated approach, it takes a plan, and it takes 2 to 3 levels of government working together. And also the types of units that are being developed. If we talk about increasing our immigration, newcomers to Canada often talk about the housing situation, not only the supply, but the setup of the units. It's not a one bedroom they're looking for, many of them are looking for multiple bedroom units. Thank you.
The next question is around productivity. So St. John as a region has one of the lowest productivity rates. And so what federal policies or projects would you champion to boost productivity, either through innovation, investment, industry diversification in the region?
That is a massive question, by the way. I think one of the areas that we really need to be looking at is it's been mentioned a few times up here is skill development. The federal government does have a role in terms of funding for skill development across the different spectrums. We know, talking with employers, and that's the only way we're going to know this, and the chambers of commerce, of which I'm a member, where the priority areas are. So one is on skill development, but also the other area is on national infrastructure projects. I do support the pipeline. If this is what is wanted in this area, across from Alberta to here, I support it. We have to have the social license, the public trust and consultation to get it here. If we look at Sims Corner, that is typically not a federal area, but the federal government plays a role in advocating and supporting it because that is a trade corridor. If we look at the Port of St. John with 2 MPs working together on that, that is significant. Just because the riding is divided between the port, it's still one port on both sides. The rail to port is going to be significant. If we look at the traffic flow, we have to work on that. That's one of the immediate solutions that we need to be looking at is how do we look at the heavy industry traffic within the midst of a residential area. Sims Corner redesign will be an important project. Thank you.
So certainly working together is part of it. And Karen and others have mentioned Sims Corner. I think there's a federal role to be played there. The same thing with the Port of St. John. I think this is the most exciting economic opportunity and project in the province today. It's one that I think has bipartisan, multi-partisan concern. Funding began under the last Conservative government, continued under the current government, and I know it will continue going forward. as well, regardless of who represents St. John, because it's such a vital and important project. And that's why I think the one exciting change about the St. John-St.Croix riding is that we link up nicely with Macadam, which is where the freight goes to either head down into New England or come back up to Upper Canada. These are projects that I've been working on even before the port was potentially in this federal riding. Given Macadam's location, given the rails coming through what was formerly New Brunswick Southwest, it's an area that I've already worked hard on. Will continue to do so. But in terms of productivity, this is where I think the parties have got a really different approach. We want to harness our natural resources right across the country. We want to develop our oil and gas. We want to ensure they have export markets, so we have alternatives from the United States. Today, when we sell oil to the United States, we sell it at a discount, as much as $15 a barrel. That's money that's coming out of the pockets of Canadian workers, Canadian companies, Canadian pension plans, and of course, Canadian governments as well, who lose tax revenue on that as well. We need to diversify our markets, but it also means growing our markets here at home. Whether it's more export opportunity for Moosehead, greater opportunity for aquaculture and fisheries, something, again, this government is threatening by requiring aquaculture to take their nets out of the water in BC. We'll come back to that later. Thank you.
So I think it's interesting on a question regarding productivity. The productivity to me means investing in new technologies and ways to become more productive, right? And so it's interesting to me that the two responses we've received so far, and presumably the two we'll receive after me, both talk about a pipeline, a relatively old technology driving productivity. I think that belies a strange understanding of where productivity comes from. Again, we need to be investing in the technologies of the future. We need to be investing in clean energy. Again, we have the highest tides in the world. Why are we not a leading developer of tide power, which is, a potential huge energy source of the future? There's two schools of thought, I guess, with respect to productivity. Either you squeeze people with less and less money until they're forced to work and be productive, and then they'll accept whatever work is given to them, or you give them the basic means of survival, and then you say, okay, now go and find meaning, and take the education that you're provided with and the stability that you have, and be productive from that, find a meaningful role in society. And the first one contributes to sort of urban decay that St. John has had a lot of trouble with over consecutive liberal and conservative governments. And the second one, a vision of a different future where, we say, look, the world can develop in different ways, and those ways are going to be more productive, right? This is the whole point of technological advancement. We need to be investing in new technologies and in our people and in our societies, instead of in companies and hoping that they'll leave some money left over for productivity afterwards. Thanks.
In Ottawa, I sit in a business caucus, and we bring in business leaders from across the country, actually around the world. And certainly if you talk to people, say like Michael McCain or Scott McCain or business leaders like that, yeah, Canada struggles with productivity. We do. We have an issue there. And how do we get around, or how do we as a federal government make us improve productivity? It's through investing in innovation, it's investing in skills training, it's working with trade schools, it's working with MBCC to make sure that the right training is matched with the jobs that are coming. And, make no mistake about it, we have a lot of ground to make up with respect to productivity in this country to be able to compete on a global basis. But as long as the federal government understands that and works with the businesses, works with business leaders, you talk about productivity in St. John-Kennebecasis, well, it's having relationships with the businesses in this community. Like again, we have 6 world head offices in this community, from JDI to Irving Oil to Cook Aquaculture to Moosehead Breweries to Crosby Molasses. I've probably missed one there. But it's about having relationships with those businesses. It's about meeting with those businesses and understanding what they need, and then the federal government can react and come forward with the proper programs that will help those businesses be more productive. Thank you.
I'm going to take this to a whole different realm, because as a business owner and a person that has run several businesses, you're only as good as the people that you have working for you. And when morale is down and the country is in the shape that it's in, you're just not going to get productivity. You can invest in all of the new electronics and new, innovation that you want. But it's not gonna fix the problem if we don't have a better country for people to get up every morning to and go to work. Right now, food's more expensive, gas is more expensive, housing's more expensive, clothes are more expensive, childcare is more expensive, if you can even get it at all. Addiction and homelessness is completely out of control. I'm going to just read a real quick piece here before my bell chimes on me. If you get an opportunity, I highly recommend, if you haven't done so, to read the book, Speaking Truth to Canadians About the Public Service. It's written by Donald Savoy, who is a political scientist here in New Brunswick. And since 2015, Ottawa's spending on outsourced contracts has increased by 41.8%. And the size of the federal public service has grown by 25%. Here's an example. Well, I guess my time's up. I would give you an example, but if you look at the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development branch of government, you'll see that there are so many levels of managers and bureaucrats, and that no work is getting done within that branch of government. So.
Fraser, I'd like to invite you up for some closing remarks.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening for the St. John Region Chamber's Federal Election Candidates Forum. We'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the candidates who have put their names forward in this important democratic process. So, how about a round of applause for them? Thank you all for your thoughtful contributions tonight. Your willingness to serve and your dedication to representing our communities is truly commendable. As we approach Election Day on Monday, we encourage everyone to take the time to learn about the candidates and their platforms, as we've done tonight, and most importantly, to exercise your right to vote. Your voice matters in shaping the future of our region. Thank you again to our candidates, to Colin for moderating, to our audience, and to everyone who helped make this evening a success. Together, we continue to build a stronger, more prosperous St. John region. Thank you.